right, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools, part of our esports mini-series that we wanted to start with just 3 or 4 episodes. And Trisha, this thing has just really gone deep for us as we continue to be able to reach out to researchers. And I think one of the things that is really just fascinating to me is how many people in the esports industry, in all aspects of esports, are willing to come on and talk, and the passion that they bring. And that is the same with today's guest.
That's right. I think I have even been guilty of, discounting how influential gaming is in society. And the more conversations that we are having as part of this series, the more I am convinced that video games need to be an important part of our classroom conversations, of our family conversations as well. And today's guest reminds us that they need to be a part of our conversations like government nationwide, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. Today we have on Dr. Leon Xiao, who is a PhD fellow at the IT University of Copenhagen. He also holds visiting appointments at Stanford Law School and the University of York's Computer Science Department. Leon researches video game law, particularly the regulation of loot boxes. We are going to include links so that you can learn more about Dr. Xiao and his research, which has been featured by The Guardian, The New York Times, NPR, just to name a few. So again, if, like me, you never thought about what law might have to do with games, I think this conversation is maybe just going to open up your mind a little bit again to when we're talking to students about future career pathways, what are some of the intersections that we're not even aware of? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's part of our hope with this mini-series is if you are a non-gamer like I am, and I was still in a 4th grade classroom today, I would not be understanding the culture of my students, right? One of the things I talk about a lot when I'm consulting is how are we inviting the culture of kids into our classrooms? And if you're a non-gamer, like I am, and what I'm learning through this mini-series, I had no idea. I thought gamers just sat in front of TVs and played games. And now we're talking to a lawyer and a researcher around game, the amount of how big the industry is and all the different avenues. If I was a 4th grade teacher, I'd be starting to think through this mini-series of, okay, I have a kid who's interested in video games. Instead of shutting that down or having these negative conversations about playing video games, if that is a passion a kid has, how do we start helping them understand there's an intersection between video games and law? There's an intersection between video games and running companies. There's an intersection between video games and TV production, aka Twitch. And today, I think that to me is the big question and just the idea to be thinking about as you're hearing today's interview is just how do we support kids today in creating intersections between their passions? And our goal with this esports series is to understand more about esports, understand more about video games. And then instead of shutting kids down, is there a way that we can start saying, hey, I listened to this podcast. If you're really into video games and ethics, there's a career path for you there in being a video game lawyer. I never thought about this, and he even goes into a little bit about esports around if you're setting up an esports program, what are the rules that everybody's following? Is everybody playing with the same kits? And I just, me and my baseball brain, which most people know already, I think about it. Yeah. How different would it be if my Seattle Mariners show up with wood bats and the Toronto Blue Jays show up with metal bats? That's not a fair game. So there's some agreements behind. And that takes somebody who understands how to negotiate, that takes somebody to understand how to set up rules and policies behind what those rules are. I just think there's so much into this.
Well, and
so as you're listening to this, just be thinking about what's the intersection of passions that maybe you have in your classroom.
And if you teach ethics, sometimes I feel like the way that we frame ethics and the teaching of it, it's like this moral dilemma of the situation that's not going to happen.
Right.
And I disengage from that conversation, right? It's sort of like the math problem that's like, Jimmy wants to buy 203 watermelons. Nobody buys that many watermelons. So again, I think almost immediately people disengage from that. But what Dr. Xiao is reminding us is if you teach ethics, take a look at a video game, right? Take a look at a mobile game and invite students to look at the design of that game as a text type. So again, I'm just thinking for any of our ELA lit teachers out there, these are also really interesting texts to bring some analysis to and some critical thinking to. So I really hope that folks enjoy this conversation. Jeff, I really like how each episode of this series is expanding how I am seeing the world of esports and gaming, and I hope that's the experience for listeners too.
Yeah, we're excited to get you over to Dr. Xiao's interview. But first, here's a quick word from today's show sponsors. Before we dive back into our conversation, I want to spotlight a game changer. Meet Daigon Esports, a trailblazer in transforming student engagement, armed with a combined 30 years of attending, supplying, and working with over 500 international schools in 60 plus countries. Daigon is poised to usher esports into your campus. Daigon's roots run deep in the international school community. Founded by two former international school students and passionate gamers, Elia and Jonas, Daigon was born from firsthand experience. They partnered with the two former founders of an international school's activity management solution to supercharge their vision with decades of experience working with international schools. Stay tuned to hear more about Elliot's captivating journey in an upcoming episode of our esports miniseries. Daigon's mission is clear: align with your students' passions and use it as a stepping stone to cultivate creativity, problem solving, global citizenship, collaboration, and communication. Critical 21st century skills championed by the World Economic Forum's Education 4.0 plan. An added cherry on top, boosting self-esteem and providing an inclusive space for students to shine. Safety and structure are Daigon's key ingredients. They have tailored a competitive, educational, and entertaining approach within a closed, secure network exclusive to international schools. Think your school is ripe for an esports club? Daigon's Esports Gaming After School Club is a treasure trove of gaming activities promoting interactivity, non-competitive play while imparting valuable life skills. Ready to go pro? Daigon's all-in-one platform simplifies esports league participation, student management, match scheduling, and game day participation. This comprehensive platform is committed to offering the best esports experience, continually expanding its reach in games, age groups, and leagues in regions. International school listeners, if you envision an esports program in your school, the path starts at Daigon. Visit daigonesports.com and book a free call to explore how Daigon can champion your esports venture. That's Daigon Esports, DAIGON esports.com. We extend a hearty thank you to Daigon for sponsoring this esports miniseries here at Shifting Schools. I also wanted to take a moment to remind you of our 3-month generative AI cohort we have starting this August. Generative AI tools like ChatGPT are changing the educational landscape, and we know our listeners are eager to take their teaching practice to the next level. That's why you listen to podcasts, to learn and be a better teacher. And that's why Tricia and I created the 3-month generative AI cohort. Now here's what you get. From August to October, for 3 months, we're inviting you to embark on a transformative journey with our 3-month generative AI cohort. Immerse yourself in a world of AI-powered education, unravel its wonders, and unleash its potential right in your classroom. We will be holding a monthly live webinar that will be tailored to your unique questions and needs, providing live interactions that support you and your learning journey. Each month, you'll receive a generative AI resource ready to implement in your teaching, pushing the boundaries of traditional methods and engaging students in the learning process while building skills they will need for the future of work. We will keep you updated with the latest news and development in the AI landscape, plus share a curated list of new innovative AI tools to keep you at the forefront of educational technology. Our goal is to geek out on AI so you don't have to. Explore new and time-saving integrations with our monthly AI-powered prompts designed to spark innovation and invite experimentation with your students in the classroom. And of course, You will be able to connect, collaborate, and share what you are trying and how it's going with your cohort peers, and have unlimited access to Trisha and I through our dedicated Slack space. But here's the catch. We are limiting this cohort to just 50 participants. This is to ensure that we can meet individual needs and offer personalized learning experiences to every one of our members. So don't delay. You're going to want to be a part of this cohort. Enroll today and ride the wave of AI-powered education with Shifting Schools. All you have to do to register is go to shiftingschools.com to secure your spot. And remember, all podcast listeners can save $25 by using the code SSPOD25 at checkout. That's SSPOD, SSPOD 25 at checkout. Thank you for that, and we hope to see you in the cohort. Now let's get back to our conversation about esports and education. And with that, here is Dr. Leon Xiao, a PhD fellow at the IT University of Copenhagen. He also has appointments at Stanford Law School and the University of York's Computer Science. He's a great interview all the way from Copenhagen, spending some time with us today. I hope you enjoy this one. And with that, on with the show. All right, I am so excited for this interview today with Leon. Just this intersection between law and gaming, and something that I didn't even know existed in the world. You know, you love it when you find, Trisha, you just find these things. You find people doing jobs where you're like, I didn't even know that was a job. And that's what today is all about. So Leon, welcome to the podcast. And we're going to jump right in here. You've been named a top 30 under 30 for Forbes Europe. And they've recognized the contributions you were making around the world of gaming law and policy. We're doing this whole mini series here on esports and taking a very broad view at the world of video games, specifically as it relates to K-12 education and some of the things we need to be thinking about. As you kind of look at the intersection of gaming and law, how did you even think about there might be something here to look at law and video games and kind of merge your two passions? How did you even get to that spot?
Sure. I am a video game player, and then I went to law school. And I think when that happens, and it happens to a lot of people now, because so many people play video games nowadays. And I think to many of us, it just so happens that, oh yeah, there are some legal issues relating to the hobby that we're engaging in. Are there any interesting things that we want to look at? And I started all of this research when I went on exchange to Singapore to look at technology law, and I was basically asked to do a research project on something, and I was like, I should look about these gambling-like things in video games, shouldn't I? And that's how it all started.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and it's so interesting because, governments listen to the research that you're doing. The industry also is looking to be more accountable. And again, like Jeff said, this intersection of law and gaming, we didn't even really think about that perspective. And then as I was researching more about the work that you do, of course, you're not alone in this field. There are many other people who are also doing this. And that pointed me to the work that you're doing for the upcoming January Ethical Games Conference. And listeners, will put the link to that in the show notes, because that's sort of an interesting thing. And you are a paper chair for that coming conference. For a teacher or a student who might, be really passionate about ethics, but not aware of how games and ethics merge, I'm wondering if you can give us an example of a conversation where the two come together, or maybe even speak to what you think is going to come up in the scope of that January conference.
Sure. I think what's really interesting about this particular conference is that it's not just about academia, because most conferences, or academic conferences, they're just about academia, and you end up having lots of professors, some more junior academic researchers talking to each other without involving the industry. What is cool about this one is that the industry is being asked to be part of this, because I think the wish is that the contributions that will be made at this conference will be something that is practicable, that could be used by the industry. So I think that's the really interesting thing. And to your question about what kind of topics might come up, I think perhaps to me, because of my research area, and I think if you ask the other people who are part of this, they will probably give you very different answers. But to me, the main thing is I think we know now that there are potential harms to video games, but that doesn't mean that people should just not play video games at all. There are also very many benefits to video games. How do we balance those things to make sure that people can benefit from all the good things about video games, but at the same time also stay safe from the potential harms? For example, we know that in some video games you can spend a lot of time or a lot of money. Are there ways that companies can put in something to make sure the players don't spend that much time or don't spend that much money? For example, I know some of the games have implemented a sort of a notice that will pop up once you've played for a certain length of time, or they start to reduce the rewards that you can get by playing to discourage you from playing too long during one single day, for example. Another interesting thing might be that, for example, we know that in quite a lot of video games, a few players spend a lot of money, whilst a lot of other players are playing that game for free. I think this is a really interesting question because it is arguable that some of those players who are spending a lot of money are potentially being harmed, but we don't know that for sure. However, at the same time, you are allowing a lot of other players, some of whom might be from countries that are less privileged, who might not be able to afford a full console game or a full software purchase. But now they can play a very good game with very nice graphics, good gameplay for free. There are definitely ethical issues relating to that. Should you be that free-to-play player? Should a company perhaps restrict how much a player can spend maximum to ensure that they're not being harmed? Lots of different issues. And I've definitely been rather preoccupied in my answer about just spending and time and money. But if you ask someone else, I'm sure there are other answers to that question.
That's a really interesting kind of idea. Have you done any research around even like minors or students, those under the age of 18? Are they spending money? Do we see them just playing the free version? Kind of talk about where's this? How does this apply to even say collegiate level? Because I know that we have a lot of universities now that are joining esports, communities. How do some of these ethics maybe play into our K-12 schools and even our collegiate level esports programs?
I'm sure. Definitely, there have been research done by others, like you've mentioned, who've looked at people who are younger, who are not adults, and I think we did see that children who would purchase loot boxes tended to, after becoming an adult, engage more often in traditional gambling and spend more money on traditional gambling. This doesn't mean that necessarily that people who purchase loot boxes went on to gamble because of loot boxes. It could just be that people who are more impulsive would just want to engage in both activities. But it does seem there does seem to be some similarities between the two products. But about esports, because that's a sort of the central theme here. I think one interesting thing is in some video games, some esports games, you can pay money to basically be more competitive, to be stronger. And I think that's a very interesting ethical issue, because should that be allowed as a sport? Because I think with traditional sports, there tends not to be a thing where if you can buy better equipment, you're faster. I don't think we would allow that. We will say, okay, you have to use the same equipment because we want everyone to compete on equal footing. But in some of the esports games, you can buy to be stronger. And of course, there are concerns about that.
I actually came across, and forgive me for forgetting where you shared this. It was in one of your many, many, many interviews that you talked about some of these like in-app or in-app purchases that are kind of, Jeff, to your question, like very manipulative for a younger player. So it was the idea that, if I'm like 8 or 9 years old, I'm playing this game, and then there's this like really adorable teddy bear that says, "Hey, I need your help. Spend 5 credits and save me." And you're also sort of pointing out like that's a really not great thing to be doing to a young child. And it's really interesting because I had never thought about in-app purchases in that way before. And it made me wonder, how many parents or caretakers that, their children might be playing some of these games, have they played the game through just to sort of check for that before? And how important that is that as adults, I think playing games that children are playing, that maybe teens that we teach are playing, it's a really great way for us to also, I think, take an interest in what they're interested in, but also C, like, what is some of the messaging? And I'm wondering, when you were doing the research to come across that, like, how many games do you have to engage with? Or do you sort of, are you looking at different genres of games more closely?
Yeah, I think in terms of perhaps not genres, but more the platforms. I've mostly focused on the mobile platform
Mm,
because I think that's where you would mostly find games that are free to download.
sure.
But then once you are inside the game, once you are a little invested into the game, you start having to spend money as compared to, I think, console games, which tend to be the ones where you've already spent quite a large amount of money buying it. There's still games, console games, that then still ask you to buy more stuff inside the game, but they tend to be less aggressive with their monetization, I think. But so mostly focus on mobile games. But for the bigger studies I do, it does involve playing through, say, 100 mobile games,
Wow.
many of which I am not particularly interested in. Match three games,
Yeah.
the ones where you have to match up the little objects so that they will then blow up. I think I'm getting quite good at that. I started out being very bad at that game, type of games, but now I think I'm getting quite good. Like I can pretty much do it without really looking at it now. Yeah. But I think you're right about parents playing the games. I think that is very important because we found that there are a lot of information about video games that are not available through a Google search. The company doesn't put it onto their website; they will just put it inside the game.
Mm,
And I think for some of the less popular games, perhaps there wouldn't be another player who decide to put that information onto a forum so that you can Google search it. So playing the game is really important, and also talk to the young people around you for sure, because I think, at least to me, with some of the things that I found, I don't think it would affect me as an adult, not a very old adult, just as a young
sure.
adult. I don't think it really affects me, but I think it possibly is just intended to affect a young person. But of course, we need to do more research on that.
Well, and I'm wondering, you've been doing this research for a while. Is your sense with mobile games that are they getting more ethical? Are they getting less ethical? Or do you feel like it's sort of staying the same? Or is that an impossible question for me to ask of you?
I suppose we haven't really checked
Mm,
whether companies have gotten better. That would be a very interesting question to look at. But I think perhaps with the bigger companies, the more famous ones that really have a reputation that they want to uphold, I think they are doing better,
mm,
or at least they are more widely promoting that they are supposedly doing better. I don't know whether the things that they've implemented necessarily means that the game is safer, but they do seem to have done more things. And I suppose the most obvious thing would be that we have seen quite a few companies remove loot boxes or gambling-like mechanics from their games.
mm.
So that's a plus. But I think especially on the mobile platform, where even smaller companies from non-Western countries are able to have a good market share. I think for those companies, they don't necessarily have thought through some of the considerations.
And sorry,
What?
Jeff, I'm going to jump in and steal one last
Keep
question. Then
going
I
because we're going to go
promise
all
I'll
day
be
on this.
quiet. And then I promise I'll be quiet. I'm just, again, I think the idea for students to understand that research, it can, again, help, hold different companies and entities to be more accountable is a really great thing for them to learn because, Jeff, you and I talk all the time about getting good at research. There's real world impact there. I'm wondering if you can explain that shift How does that happen? As a researcher, are you bringing that to a corporate entity? Is it you're speaking directly to a government and then they're applying the pressure? Like, what does that process actually look like?
It's really interesting that you mentioned, engaging with the companies directly and engaging with governments, because I think neither of those would be the really effective way. Both are
Mm.
like I think both sound like they would work, but
Yeah.
the problem with the companies is usually you can't reach them, or they might actually sort of show that, oh, we want to hear about this, and then they don't get back to you, or they listen to you and then they do nothing.
Right.
So I don't think directly engaging with companies, at least from my experience, have really worked out. And engaging with governments, the problem with that is it is effective if you are able to convince the government to adopt a new policy that is going to cause change. Absolutely. But that process is so lengthy, so prolonged that
So slow. Yeah.
it's so slow. So, say you have a research finding, I think it'll be 5 years, maybe even
Yeah.
10, before you can see it being put into practice. And I think perhaps in the last few years we've had more bigger issues
Yeah.
to be worried about than video games. So it hasn't really been on the agenda. But what I think is really important is actually the public communication part and
Mm.
engaging with the media, like speaking with you guys, speaking with the video game industry media in particular. I think because I think for the policy impact, when I think my research got companies to change the way they act, it's not because I published the paper. It's because a journalist, very good one, picked up on the findings, and then it got promoted, and then people actually read it, and then players were all realizing, oh, this is a problem. And I think only then did the companies comply. Not because I did. Well, I suppose it's because I did the study as a first thing. But if I just did the study and didn't really communicate it, and or didn't really, very fortunately, had the story picked up, I don't think it would have had the impact that it did.
That makes a lot of sense because Jeff and I have interviewed a number of science communicators who, as you were alluding to, some of the bigger problems, helping people understand kind of the scope of gigantic issues. There is the research, but then there's making sure that it's accessible to the public. So I think that's a great message for teachers and students to take away is what's the research component that, again, seems like, okay, this has gone through a really robust process and kind of bringing the data together. That's one thing. But then how do I get people to care about this and understand maybe what the stakes are in a way that, I don't know, like it's dinner table conversation, maybe like what is the soundbite from the NPR story that you've done that folks are going to actually be able to explain to one another? Thanks for kind of explaining that piece. And Jeff, now my questioning is over. I'm sorry that I stole so many.
That's okay. Well, I was just wondering, you do a lot, globally. Are you finding that right now, where we are right now, are there some big themes that are emerging when you're kind of doing this research? You're going to conferences. Are there kind of some big themes around gaming that you think there is starting to have this conversation around and we're starting to look more closely at? Do you see any themes kind of emerging at the moment?
It's quite interesting because I think for me, maybe it's because I'm quite a digital person, but I've never really felt sort of the national borders. And I feel
Mm.
like perhaps just my rather small research field, even though it's been quite international, I think we've just been talking to each other remotely, sending emails. So I don't think we've really been sort of in our own bubble.
Sure.
It's a good thing that we manage that. As to any themes that are emerging, I'm not sure. What kind of themes do you mean?
Well, just around, I think around this idea of, you talked a little bit about gambling, and maybe there is maybe or maybe not, there's a correlation there. We're not sure, but you're just, you're starting to dig into this. Are there any things that we're just seeing of people are starting to take notice on a global scale? Some of your research coming out that you're just hearing more conversations around, like the stuff you've done at the Times, the NPR. Are you just hearing some things out there, or what is the conversation right now?
I suppose with video game monetization as a thing, I think loot boxes sort of has been the big
The big
issue.
thing. Okay.
I think like quite a lot of countries have already looked at it. I think they've decided whether they're going to do something or they've decided they're not going to do something. I feel like that issue is perhaps
A big one right now.
but I guess what's emerging is we're thinking about the new ways the games are being monetized. I mentioned earlier that we've seen some games remove their loot boxes, but that doesn't mean that this game just decided it doesn't want to make money anymore.
Right.
Actually implemented a new way of making money, and that new way is called a season pass or a battle pass, where you spend a little bit of money to sort of buy like a membership for a month or 2 or 3 months, but then you don't get all the rewards just by buying the membership. You actually have to keep playing the game to sort of get levels, and only if you play a rather lengthy amount of time for each of those games do you get all the rewards that you want. And this seems potentially a little problematic because the player spend money, but they're not going to be able to get everything they want unless they also then invest more time. And the game is not really very upfront about exactly how much time you need to spend. And the player might they might feel like, I've already spent this amount of money, I've already bought the things, so I better keep playing so that I get all the things that I already bought. Things like that.
Yeah. I would like to wrap this up by you just kind of maybe going back to your K-12 days and some of the things like in school. You said you were a video gamer. Were you playing video games in middle school, high school, and kind of like what was your journey, even if you can go back that far and just kind of reflect on things that were happening in your middle school, high school days around playing games, and then you get to university and you're like, hey, there might be something here. Can you maybe just talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, sure. I have a rather unique experience. I think in that my parents are very encouraging of video game related things. I know other parents are probably a lot more negative about it. I realize that throughout this podcast, I've painted video games in a rather negative picture. But that's just because of some of the monetization things. I think as an activity, my parents encouraged me to do it. They didn't really try to restrict me, and I think that also made me think quite positively about this activity. And yeah, and I think increasingly, this is a very big industry, and there are many different jobs available in this industry. I think for me, maybe it's on the legal side. In addition to just doing academic research on video games or video game law, you can also be, say, an in-house counsel at a video game company. That would also be very interesting. But there are many job opportunities. So definitely look at video games as an opportunity rather than a negative thing to avoid as a young person or as someone interacting with a young person, I think.
Tricia, I'm going to think about it the next time. And I hate to admit this on the podcast, but sometimes I've been watching Netflix for so long that it pops up the little screen that says, "Are you still watching?" And as we're talking to Leon, I can see that now in video games. You've been playing video games for 5 hours and all of a sudden it's like, do you really still want to play? Just to give you that pause of, oh, well, how long have I been sitting here? Because sometimes you don't realize, you're binge watching your favorite show and you don't realize it's been 5 hours and you didn't accomplish anything today because you've just been watching TV. So I love even you talking about some of those crossovers that we're seeing regardless of media, whether that media is video games, whether that media is now binge watching, which is an issue as well, whatever, pick your platform. It's just interesting to start seeing some of those overlays on that as well.
Well, yeah. And, I'm thinking about it too. I just recently was on a flight and noticing, I had somebody that was sitting sort of like diagonally from me. So I could see it was a Tetris-like game. And he must have played it for like 5 hours straight. I was on one hand kind of impressed. But I like that you're sort of, inviting us to have these conversations about our media use just from a practical standpoint. As a researcher who, again, you're researching games, you mentioned, like the huge number of mobile games that you play. Can you speak to teachers in terms of like what your workflow is like? How do you document the research that you're doing while you're experiencing gameplay? I'm thinking like, how do you even timestamp a moment in a game that you want to return to? So like, what does your notes look like?
Yeah, I think the most helpful feature is actually to just take screenshots.
Okay.
I think for me, because I know. I think for researchers who play video games to sort of look at how it has been narrated, how the storytelling has been, or how the character has developed, I think for those researchers it'll be more difficult. They'll probably take proper notes. But for me, I'm just playing a game, a great volume game, but for each game, not for very long, just to find a very specific thing. So for me, it's usually just start playing the game, go as far as I need to find that product that I need to screenshot, take the screenshot, and I'm done. But I realize that's probably quite unique. And I think, Jeff, what you said about different media mediums, and I think even on social media, we're increasingly seeing these measures being implemented to try to interrupt you, to try to remind you. I think on Instagram, I've seen this pop up where if you scroll down far enough, it will tell you you've actually already seen all of these content. Are you sure you're still them all? And then I've heard that others have encountered on TikTok a thing where it will remind you that it's been a while since you started watching these things. So,
oh gosh, I feel almost like proud of myself that I've never come across that in TikTok. So it means maybe I haven't used too much of it, but that's great. And I've seen tech ethicists even debate some of the buttons that are available with social media. Like if it wasn't a heart button, but it was sort of like, I have a question about this, or, like where is the friction almost that we can add in some of that design that might, again, just make us a little more aware of our consumption. So I think that's a really cool challenge for teachers and students to be looking at their gameplay, looking at really media consumption, our media diets. Is there enough friction? Is there no friction at all? And what might the designer of that game or that platform or that app do just to like slow us down a little bit? I think that would make for such a great class conversation.
Yeah, I even love the idea of just looking at games or having kids bring in games that they might be playing and have conversations. We can go back to loot boxes. Have conversations of why is the loot box there right now? It just all of a sudden you've gotten to this point in the game. And now they're asking you, they don't usually ask you in the first part of the game. They wait till they got you into it. And then now they're asking you to spend the money or upgrade your armor or whatever it happens to be. Just even, I think, having conversations with students, like what are they thinking that it's at this point in the game that they start asking for money, and what happens after that? If you don't spend the money, all of a sudden you're at a disadvantage, which now makes you want to go back and spend the money. So you have the advantage, and it's just this psychological gameplay that they're getting you into to make you buy, to click on the loot box. So I think just those conversations, even just having those conversations with kiddos in class, I think is just a great way to start just thinking about the ideas, right? Well, Leon, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for your time. And I know time, I can see the clock behind you. It looks like it's 7 p.m. wherever you are. So appreciate you staying up and being on this with us. We will have links to your Twitter and your website. Is there any other links or places that people could reach out to you to learn more about your research or places that they can connect?
No, I think they should be able to find me on those places. I also have accounts on the other platforms. So I don't really use them.
Okay.
So those would be good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for your insight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
If you missed out on our sold out 3-month generative AI cohort that started this month, don't worry, you can join our new cohort starting this September. So we hope that you join us from September through November and embark on a unique 3-month transformational journey hosted by myself and Trisha. Created specifically for educators, edtech professionals, and instructional coaches, this program is designed to bridge the chasm between traditional teaching methodologies and AI-enhanced learning. Together, we'll unravel the marvels of generative AI, demystifying its vast potential, and show you how it's shaking up the educational landscape. Learn how AI can create personalized educational content, provide meaningful feedback, foster dynamic student interaction, and deliver real-time learning for students. Here's what's in store for you. First, you get our live webinars. Each month, we'll host a 30-minute live webinar answering your unique questions, addressing your needs, and supporting your learning journey in real time. So stay tuned for the webinar schedule. You'll also receive generative AI resources, You'll receive a fresh, ready-to-roll resource every month built around one of our generative AI frameworks, empowering yourself to immediately apply the knowledge you're acquiring. Of course, you'll also get monthly updates and news reviews. Stay in the know with our concise review of the most critical updates and news items impacting education in the world of AI. Also, you'll get a list of curated tools, explore cutting-edge AI tools handpicked by us for their relevance in modern classrooms. It's time to revolutionize the way we teach. You also get monthly prompts. Each month, we will give you an inspired prompt where you have 3 different prompts. These AI-powered prompts are designed to spark your creativity, encourage you to explore, experiment, and innovate in fresh and exciting ways. Of course, there was also an asynchronous share via Slack, connecting with your cohort peers and us anytime, anywhere. Our optional Slack space offers a perfect environment for continuous knowledge sharing, feedback, and collaboration. To ensure that we're able to address each individual's needs and create a tailor-made learning experience, we're capping the cohort once again at 50 participants. So, what are you waiting for? Join us on this extraordinary journey. Let's revolutionize education together, one AI tool at a time. We expect this cohort to sell out fast as well, so don't wait and book your spot today. And remember to use that code SSPOD25 at checkout to save $25. Hope to see you in the cohort.